To discussions with the writer Fred here on Black Video News in San Antonio, Texas. We just finished a election in November that had tremendous results, especially for the Democratic Party. As they took back the House of Representatives, we lost, I think, 2 seats in the Senate.
Correct.
But what is important to those of us here on Black Video News and discussion with the writer Fred is the black turnout and how critical and important that vote will be moving forward into the year 2020, when I do believe that we will have a strong attempt to remove the sitting president. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that'll be the case. So let me just throw some statistics out to you here real quickly. California, we know we have the Electoral College. Now, we may not like it, but we have to use it. So let's take a look at the 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 top states with electoral votes. California, 55. Texas, 36. New York, 29. Florida, 29. Illinois, 20. Ohio, 18. Michigan, 16. New Jersey, 14. Wisconsin, 10. Why do I point out these states? Because this is where we have a large black population. And if we can get black folks out to vote, you're almost there in terms of being elected president. And so let's take Texas. We have 3 major areas, well, we might say 4, of black population. Houston, the largest, obviously. Then you have Dallas, you have San Antonio, and you have Austin. So that brings us down to our discussion today. It's local. Mm-hmm. All politics is local. And what the two of you are doing can have an impact in the national election by getting blacks out to vote, not only in the upcoming election next year for the local elections, but for the national election the next year after that. And so I want to welcome my good brother Gordon Benjamin back to discussion with the writer Fred, and also Margaret Richardson back to discussion with the writer Fred. Let me just give our viewers a little background on you all. Show them how equipped and talented you are to handle this subject. Brother Benjamin is chairman of the Voter Registration, Education, and Mobilization Committee for the Psi Alpha chapter, the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Go ahead, brother.
Thank you, brother.
Go ahead, brother.
Will do.
And he has been the finance chairman of Wheatley Community School Leadership Council and former precinct chair for the Bexar County Democratic Party in precinct 4003.
That's correct.
So he is well versed in local politics. Professor Margaret Richardson is a professor of American government as well as Texas government, which includes local politics at San Antonio College here in San Antonio, Texas. And I'm proud to say that she was one of my great honored students at UTSA. We had a good time in those days, didn't we, Mike?
Yes, we did.
So let's get right into the subject here. We have an election coming up next year that could be a momentum to go to the next year, right? Mm-hmm. 2020. Right. What you all have been doing is grassroots work with the community. And I think you've been very successful in some of the things you've done to get blacks, number one, schooled on the importance of voting and also getting them out to vote. And so what do we have to do? Let's start with you, Brother Benjamin. How do we keep this momentum going, and what do we need to do going forward into the year 2019?
Momentum is a topic that requires a strategy, because if you look at it for instance, a good football team. A good football team may have been down and then they get an opportunity and then they score, reverses the tide, and you hear announcers say the momentum has changed simply because they have come from behind. They're now more competitive. And what we do in the voting area is to make sure that people understand the importance of being educated on the candidates and informed on the issues, or if you flip it, informed on the candidates and educated on the issues, so that they can recognize the importance of getting out to vote. And what we want to do over the period of 2019 and 10 and a half months of 2020 is to make sure people understand the importance of not just registering to vote, but going to vote. And I think in some areas of the country that's been missing, because there are a lot of states that have been engaged in voter suppression tactics to keep people of color from voting, primarily African Americans or minority communities. And these obstacles are real.
Doesn't it just anger you? It really angers me to think that folks out there feel that they can do certain things to stop us from wanting to vote. I mean, come on.
And my anger,
That angers me.
anger is one of those emotions that's meant to be used to let other people know how their behavior affects you. So when you get angry, it just means that you have to go and make a move contrary to what people might expect you to do and do something totally different. So rather than get there and bang on the table when it's not necessary, you go outside and you get as many people who feel the way you feel to show up, and then you have a greater presence.
But can't you do both?
You can do both, but at the same time, it's
Just
more
getting anger
subtle.
alone won't do any good.
No, anger alone won't do any good. Never solved any problem as far back as I can remember. All the times I got angry and tried to use that to persuade people got me into big trouble, especially with my dad.
But can't anger be a momentum?
It can. It can be a game changer.
Yeah,
You
it can be a game
you have
changer.
to know how to channel that. And what we do and what we're going to be working on is, a couple of projects to make inroads in the lack of interest, that apathy that goes along with election time and voting time. Because until this 2018 midterm election of this year, there's a lot of people who did not vote, who had not voted and in a long time. And the turnout, for instance, in Bexar County was like almost 59%. Turnout in Bexar County, all across the county. And the only Republican candidates that were elected was because they didn't have any Democratic opposition.
Position? Yeah. 59% in an off-year election
In
is
an
pretty
off-year
good.
election, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And nationwide, the state of Texas had the sixth largest turnout in this midterm election compared to all the other 49 states in the country. The sixth largest.
Okay.
And this turnout in the midterm of 2018 far surpassed the midterm turnout of 2014
Okay.
by
Great.
36%, I think, this last I read.
Margaret, what do you think?
Well, first off, I think we need to start paying attention to what's going on. It's not enough to just continue the conversation, but we have to see that every election matters. First off, just because we had a huge turnout in this election, we're going to see that turnout in the 2019 mayoral election probably drop, because people tend to forget about that election. They also tend to forget about that with that election, we also have some of the school districts, some of the local school districts will be electing or re-electing board members. People forget about
Oh,
that.
my God. And how important is the school board?
Exactly. It's
really important.
With San Antonio Independent School District, they've had some issues. A couple of months ago, they fired something like 132 people.
I remember,
Most
yeah.
of them were teachers. And
Yes.
then there's been, they gave P.F. Stewart over to Democracy Prep.
Right,
a
out of
charter
New
school.
York. Yes.
Exactly. And they're, people have some issues with Democracy Prep because they also have schools up in Washington, D.C., and their suspension and expulsion rates are a little bit higher than what people back here knew about. So those elections matter. And we have to make sure that we pay attention to what's going on with city council. We have to make sure that we know what's going on with state legislature. We go back into session in January. And what I noticed, not only talking with people in the community, but also talking with my students, is that a lot of people don't know that we even have a legislature. They just talk about Congress and they talk about city council, but they don't know anything about the legislature. They don't know when they meet. They don't know how often they meet. They don't know anything about who their state representatives are. I had a quiz that I would ask them different questions about how well they knew their state actors, if they knew who their state representative was, if they knew who their state senator was. And the questions that I kept getting for state representative were Joaquin Castro,
Who was it? Yes.
who is a U.S. representative.
Yeah,
Now, he
Congress.
used to be a state representative, I believe, in District 117, but that's been a few years ago.
Yeah.
He is now a U.S. House member, but a lot of people don't recognize that connection.
Right. Yeah.
And then when it comes to state senator, they said Ted Cruz. And, they forget that we have Menendez, we have now Pete Flores in 19, Donna Campbell, Judith Zaffarini, small part of Stone Oak, out to Laredo. So there's a lot of information that tends to go by the wayside of what people know about the state legislature. And they don't know what the state legislature does.
Hey, one of the problems, I think, is that people associate elections with November.
Right.
And if it's not in November, they don't think it's something that they have to bother about. But the city election is in May, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And that's where your local officials are elected. And they directly impact you more so than the President of the United States or the Congress, because they're dealing with local issues. So you all have been working closely. And what I'm picking up is a goal to unite different. I know Chuck Slaughter's out there doing something. You all are doing something. Are you all going to try to bring these all together and unite under one umbrella for the upcoming election?
And what we're going to try to do is have some common meetings, meet and identify the common ground that we can move forward on. I've reserved the meeting room at the Carver Branch Library for January 24th, and it's open on December 20th. So if we can get everybody there on December 20th, we can identify some things and then come back to the Community Engagement Forum, because I think the Community Engagement Forum helps to identify, it's an educational forum designed to raise awareness as to the importance of going to vote after people get registered, because people can register in huge numbers, but then if you don't show up at the polls, you have no impact. And we had people in 2016 who stayed home, didn't go and vote as a protest. And I have the hardest time in my life trying to figure out what is a protest vote by not going. You just, you just negated your vote, your voice. No votes, no vote or no votes. So we decided that we would come together and find, common ground where we could get this ball rolling by increasing availability in our communities, to use various forms of communication, whether it's the print media, radio, television, and social media, to increase the efforts and the participation in the community. As you said, the local elections and the state elections, and those things that will have a far-reaching impact and to help make inroads in the procrastination and the apathy that we find is causing people not to take part in this process. And in my personal opinion, and I know there might be some people who don't agree with me and who might agree with me also, if voting wasn't so important, why are so many different states and entities trying to make it difficult for African Americans and other communities of color to go and vote?
Right, yeah.
If you're reducing the number of days that you can vote early, or you're closing polling places in predominantly minority communities, what message does that send? This is an important part of the process that comes in a democracy.
Is it more, and we'll pick this up after our break, but I want to throw this out to you right now. Is this a bigger problem with the millennials than it is with the older generations? We're going to take a break and we'll come back and address that. We'll be right back with you with discussions with the writer Fred here on Black Video News.
40% of food in America is never eaten.
Marie, you have prediabetes.
Prediabetes? I don't have time to eat right or exercise. I'm a busy mom.
Oh, you're a busy mom.
Yeah.
This is great news. Busy moms never get prediabetes.
Wait, what?
Let me just... Yeah, this is all the people at risk for prediabetes, and way over here, busy moms. No?
Hey, you.
Yeah, you. Getting that college education. What are you gonna do? Graduate and take some office job? Be like everybody else? Or will you dare do something different? Like, be a teacher. You could be my teacher. You got the skills.
The smarts?
Yes, you. You could be the teacher I never forget. That'd be cool. Does that corporate job even have recess? What are you gonna make of yourself?
What are you gonna make of me?
Nothing to do this week? Don't miss another event. Go to blacksinsanantonio.com for our event calendar. The home of the largest business directory in San Antonio with an African American focus. Sign up today for our weekly e-blast and text message alerts. Help us make this a better community. Connect, empower, grow.
Welcome back to Discussions with the Writer Fred right here on Black Video News. Before we went to our break, I'd raise the issue about millennials. Are they the real problem in terms of getting folks out to vote? Old folks like me, we go vote. And as you know, one of the areas that politicians never want to mess with the exception of those folks in Washington, D.C., they're really a different breed. But they never mess with Social Security because they know old folks, all we do is sit around and wait. Well, it's almost vote day. We got 5 days to vote day. We got 4 days. We go vote. And so the ones that suffer are the millennials because they don't believe they get out to vote. How can we turn that around?
Actually, I think we may have turned a corner with that. Unfortunately, it may have been due to the recent school shootings. The one in Santa Fe, the one in Parkland, Sutherland Springs. I think the students have felt like perhaps they didn't have a voice, and maybe it was time for them to stand up and do something. They saw an inactive government. Maybe they saw some of the school administrations that weren't very open to listening to the students, and the students decide to take some of those matters into their own hands. They've gotten proactive, and the question with me right now for them is really how do we keep them active? Because some of them say if they supported Beto O'Rourke, and Beto didn't win, but he came within 200,000 votes of beating Ted Cruz. So if you were a Beto supporter and Beto didn't win, how do you keep up that energy going into the next election, particularly in an election that tends to be not as exciting as this last election was?
Isn't it about getting candidates that could create that electricity? Beto O'Rourke was able to do that. Barack Obama was able to do that.
That was lightning in a bottle.
What do you mean by lightning? Just one time?
Well, we saw what happened with Hillary Clinton. People were excited about it, but Barack Obama comes out of nowhere and just kind of blasts her out of the water. Everyone assumed that Hillary Clinton was the presumptive nominee until Barack Obama announced himself and demonstrated that he was a better candidate.
Well, okay. South Carolina made Barack Obama.
Right.
And it was the black vote in South Carolina, which is concentrated heavily in the Democratic Party. And which I don't want to leave these millennials because I want to get Brother Benjamin's opinion, but something we can come back to is that what's going to excite black voters? They have to have a black candidate? Is that the only way we get blacks out to vote?
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The point I was trying to make, though, was about the lightning in a bottle, is that with Barack Obama, it electrified the base. With Beto O'Rourke, it electrified the base. Plus, Beto O'Rourke went out to talk to college students. He went out and talked to people in the community, and he went out in a way that I don't see regular candidates do in some cases. That's what we're going to have to do. So we're going to have to create that lightning in a bottle and it not be the exception anymore. That's got to become the rule.
Brother Benjamin?
And the next candidate that has that appeal has to have a vision of his own. Beto O'Rourke's vision and his message was equal to, on a certain level, of what Barack Obama did. Now, Barack Obama's introduction to national politics came in the 2004 Democratic Convention, I believe in Denver, Colorado. And he made a dynamic speech, that gave people hope. And people recognized that he had something to offer. And ultimately, after his, term as a senator, he got into that race. Well, and we know the rest is history. But at the same time, when Beto O'Rourke started talking to the camera, and when he started talking to people, and he was talking to people's hearts about, we are better than what, has been presented to us, and we can do better. All we have to do is get involved. So that particular message resonated with enough of the populace, the voting population in Texas. And then again, it has some national appeal because the kids in Florida who were, as survivors of that school shooting decided that we've had enough. And no more, enough of this. And we know what's happened with the voting in Georgia and Florida when it comes to the Senate race and the governor's race and all of these kinds of things, because Florida and Georgia has that history that goes way back to before Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was eviscerated, in Citizens, Shelby versus Holder. And that took away some of the strength and the teeth out of the law for the federal government to be able to, make oversee changes that these states wanted in, the way they handle their voting practices. And we know that some of these southern states that were on the list have reason, that they needed pre-clearance because they have a history of doing that. And they're doing the same thing today without any of that oversight. But again, that national message, that vision, and when the person can, articulate his or her vision, that has a certain amount of appeal and people get excited. It's just like if people who went to the racetrack and everybody said, well, I got a nickel on the horse at number 5. And then, the guy came by and asked me if I was going to put my nickel on number 5. And I didn't ever have anybody to come by and ask me if I was going to bet on number 5. So that sounds pretty good. And now you have a momentum and a movement by word of mouth and by common agreement that it would be to our benefit to attach ourselves to this, because there is a possibility that it will do some good. And now I can do my part by getting involved.
Yeah. Why is it the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965? And how many years is that? Almost over 50 years ago. Why is it that we as blacks still need the big brother to help us? I want to be careful how I say this, but nobody can tell me that I can't vote. I don't care what they do. If they're going to say, well, you have to go way over on the other side of town, I'm going to find a way to go over there and vote. And so what they do is they close down the polls, and they do all these different things. Why should that stop you from voting? Do you all have a feel for that at all? Well, I'm going to vote. I don't care.
I'll let Professor Richardson go first.
Okay.
Margaret.
Do you want to respond to that?
To a person that already may not feel comfortable voting, that becomes one more excuse not to go.
Yeah, but that's my problem. Why don't you feel comfortable voting?
A lot of people don't feel like the process works for them. Maybe they feel like they've been disenfranchised, ignored.
But and
what happens is that they block out instead of, well, I need to stand up. I need to make sure I go vote. It's the direct opposite happens. What they do is they say, well, you know what? I can't do this. This is showing me that I don't need to have anything to say. So I'm just not going to vote. To me, it equates also to the protest vote in the 2016 presidential election. I don't have my candidate in there, so screw it. I'm not going to vote now. And that's what happened.
And that's a big part of the problem with voter apathy. People who have been disenfranchised or oppressed for so long are tired of feeling like, you kicked me in my teeth so long, I'm not going to show up and let you kick me again. So physiologically, there's a reaction to the rejection of your participation. So he says, well, I'm tired of getting denied. I'm tired of getting pushed back. I'm tired of getting obstacles placed before me. So I just won't take part. Now, when you look at the history of disenfranchisement, the first 10 years after the end of the Civil War was a Reconstruction period. African Americans were being voted into state legislatures as well as to, as senators and congressmen.
Representatives.
All right. After those 10 years, the machinations of local communities decided that they would get involved, and they started creating literacy tests. How many jelly beans in a jar? Other literacy tests, who's the governor, who's the president, and how many times at night does an owl hoot, and all these other different unrealistic questions,
Brother
for
Benjamin,
which.
that's gone.
Yes,
those things are gone.
But at the same time,
those obstacles are out of the way.
the systems that they put in place have now perpetuated to voter purges, other suppression tactics. All right,
Purges are different.
But
Purges are different.
Again, if you don't vote within a certain amount of time, they come up with a decision to send a postcard. And in a couple of cases, it's been determined that 364,000 people were disenfranchised in the state of Georgia, and not all of them had moved as was claimed by the Secretary of State's office. And he is the same Secretary of State that supervised, the registration and of voters while he was running for governor as the Secretary of State. And the election there hung in the balance for quite a long time. So I'm saying that the people who are not accustomed to just having, the ability to go in and recognize how important it is, once they feel like they have been kicked around and pushed back enough, they're not going to want to go through that process, of being denied again and again and again. So therefore, they don't
that's
go.
our job, though, isn't it?
It is.
That's our job, to let them know it doesn't have to be that way.
Yes.
No one can stop you from voting.
And this is where information campaigns come in. This is where education campaigns come in. This is where mobilization comes in, because you have to repeat the message over and over again that no matter what it is that they're trying to do, there is a remedy. And that remedy is you show up, you take part, and you get involved, and you won't have to worry about being denied or continue to be disenfranchised.
Yeah, you need to go ahead, Mary. No, go ahead.
What I was going to say, to piggyback on Mr. Benjamin, is that if you don't like to see the change that you have now with the elected officials in there, how come you can't go and find someone or become an elected official yourself?
And run
Go into
yourself.
that seat.
Yeah. If you know that if you don't vote, they may take you off the rolls, go vote.
Correct.
Then you don't have to worry about that. And what bothers me a great deal is the one institution that has the dominant control over our people is the church. And it seems to me the church should be having your groups come in on Saturdays and talk and tell the people, show up and listen to what they have to say about voting. And if we don't get that, some days I drive up here and I go by Antioch on a Saturday, parking lot's full. I go by Second Baptist, parking lot's full. Get to the library, nobody's there. So these folks have that kind of influence. On those Saturdays when those parking lots are full, have them be going in to listen to you all talk about voting. Doesn't that make sense to you all? I mean, you may not want to go public on the church. I don't care. But does that make sense to you?
I think the church has a duty to make its congregation aware of the voting, the importance of voting. Get registered and go and vote. Know what it is that you're voting for. Know about the process. And if you feel like you're running into an obstacle, have somebody that you can contact and call and
Absolutely.
get this clarified.
Absolutely.
And if Bexar County Elections, for instance, in San Antonio, if Bexar County Elections has a reputation of not putting information out, question them, call them, because they have to answer to us.
But see, the people need to hear that from you because they are intimidated by this. It won't do anything, and it's easy to retreat and not vote. Of course, we know why the turnout was so tremendous in 2008. because black folks felt that they were a part of the process because they had a black candidate.
Because they had someone that looked like him.
Yes.
And then with this election, the thing that got people out to vote was the Trump effect. Because we saw a president who was taking us from constitutional crisis to the next constitutional crisis, going from one extreme to the next. The current conversation right now is one of his lawyers just pled guilty and will be sentenced to 3 years in prison because of supposed dirty deeds that he was covering up for the president. So when you see a president that's like that, who thinks he's in a reality show, who's living for the next season finale, and things going on back and forth with the family being invested in places they shouldn't be invested in, I think that's what drew people out. Another place that I think we need to be at is schools. Mr. Benjamin has gone over to plenty of schools in San Antonio for years, going back and forth and getting people registered to vote, making sure that, and he's not telling them which way to vote, he just wants them to get registered. But the problem that I've seen with the Democrat Party is we don't pull those people who have been newly registered out to vote.
Yes.
So we need to be in schools, we need to get people registered to vote. And then on a college campus, when I'm talking to my students, just like you talk to me and my fellow classmates, you make sure that we have the information on both sides.
Okay. Let's wrap up here. You want to tell us about the two events, the one on December 20th, the other one on January 24th, and who they can contact?
On December 20th at the Carver Branch Library, across the street from here in the 3300 block of East Commerce, we're going to be having an open meeting, to develop strategies, and community organizations, professional organizations, fraternities, sororities, everybody's invited. Even if you don't belong to an organization, you're just a citizen that wants to be heard, come out so we can develop the strategies to engage the new groups of voters in the community. First-time voters, 17 years and 10 months, 18-year-olds, as long as they're going to turn 18 before election days, they need to become aware of how important it is to go and to register and then to go vote. Don't just register and be a registered voter and then you don't go vote.
Okay.
So we're going to develop some strategies then, and on January 24th, we're having a community engagement educational forum so that we can outline what we have decided upon from December 20th until it's time to publicize that. Because the week prior to January 24th is Martin Luther King week, Dream Week. And on the 21st is the march. And if I have an opportunity, again, as I have had in the past, I will speak to the crowd on the importance of getting registered and going to vote. I think people heard enough about protest votes don't work, and that's why we had such a big turnout, not only in the state of Texas, but nationally. We had a lot of different things that turned out, and now when you see in North Carolina, Michigan, and Wisconsin, you're getting lame duck legislatures who are trying to take the power away from the elected officials that the people duly elected. And there have been numerous protests in these states to that. It's like, no, you're trying to usurp the will of the people. You're not going to be able to do that. But once people come together, and when we work on this, we're trying to take advantage of all of 2019 to get ahead of the game in 2020, so that we don't just spend 2020 registering people to vote and hope they turn out.
Okay. Margaret, you want to take a minute and wrap up?
Well, first off, thank you for inviting us to be here, Professor. It's always a good time to sit down and be able to talk with you. So I appreciate that. I support what Mr. Benjamin is doing. I support the efforts of Mr. Slaughter. Mr. Nias Harris is the one that originally brought me on board to do the What's on the Ballot workshops that you and I were doing. So I appreciate that opportunity. And I just want to keep the conversation going. We need to be able to do that. And we've been talking with people, and I think the effort is there. Now we just need to just start coming together and then moving forward. Okay.
Well, we will, here on Discussions with the Writer Fred on Black Video News, continue this dialogue going up to May election, then after that going up to the 2020 election, and hopefully we can stimulate people to really want to get out and vote and have an impact on what's happening in our communities. Thank you for tuning in with Discussion with the Writer Fred, and remember, we are always telling our story our way.